maybe even a Marvel movie where you don't know characters, where they have these ratings come out and it can reflect poorly. Someone sees that Rotten Tomatoes score and they're like, well, I'm not like a Marvel person, so I'm not going to see this if Rotten Tomatoes is giving it a low score.
Welcome to the BXG podcast, the podcast where pop culture and nerd culture meet at the nexus of the universe and are melded as seamlessly as smashing plates and smashing box office records. I am one of your hosts, Brendan Bestwick, alongside my co-host, a man who leaves no stone unturned, Greg Filson. Greg, how are you this fine evening?
Well, I believe the old phrase dates back 100 years, goes, there's no bad time to rock, Brenton. And so I'm doing well. I'm doing well.
Indeed, how are you, Brenton? There is no bad time to rock. That is, I can confirm that. I'm good. You know, getting ready for this winter weather advisory that is headed our way.
Oh shit. It's cold here. They actually have a freeze warning tonight, which
cold.
It's a freeze warning. It is actually gonna be cold tonight. Yeah.
Warning mean it might happen.
What?
A warning mean it may occur.
It may.
Like, hey, we want you to know.
It'll definitely occur in the mountains.
There's a good possibility that this could occur.
Yeah. It probably won't occur, where I live, but it'll occur in the mountains for sure.
Kind of like the U.S. intelligence services warning for the last month that there was going to be a full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
Oh, yikes.
Just saying. I don't know if that was leftist, rightist, center. Depending on who you talk to, it might be Russophobia and neo-Nazism.
But when it comes to going to war, that's one that every president can agree on. Let's do it because I need an economy boost. So.
Yeah. But you know what? To go to war, you know what you got to do? Rise and grind, 5 a.m. club. All right, let's get into BXG Podcast publishes every Friday at 9 a.m. on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, and other podcast services around the globe, except in Russia. Just kidding. We're actually in Russia. We've had Russian listeners, and all jokes aside, if you are our one Russian listener and you're listening to this, we're praying for you because we're sure that you're a decent person.
Right.
Anyway, excuse me. All politics aside, you can catch us on social media, facebook.com/BHG Podcast, Instagram at BHG Podcast, at GTPhils, at Y2B, Twitter at BHG Podcast, at GTPhilson, at Y2B, and over on our YouTube channel for reviews, interview discussions, Oreos, so on and so forth, including the 110th birthday Oreo.
That's right.
Which was excellent.
It was.
Eat the whole pack.
Nice.
That night.
Really?
No.
Oh.
No, not that night. But it was in less than 24 hours. So there's that. We have
a lot of Oreo.
It was a smaller pack. It wasn't like a family size.
Oh, okay. Just a regular pack?
No, like a smaller. The special edition ones are like smaller.
Yeah,
the Lady Gaga one was small.
Right. Okay.
There's an Easter one out now, but it's just a double stuffed Oreo with dyed green frosting and Easter bunnies on the cookie. So there's nothing special about it. We have a fun show. We're gonna talk about a topic that I think that you and I brought up last week this past Monday when we did the Uncharted review, and then we are going to have Peacemaker season 1 review, and then break down the penultimate episode of The Amazing Race and talk Celebrity Big Brother finale and Survivor preview of Survivor and Top Chef, and just kind of get maybe a little bit of predictions. I thought about it a little bit too late in the game, but we should have had Ty on to do the Big Brother thing because he clearly won is leading in points after the first season. So, but maybe we can get
a long season now.
It is. And, maybe we can get him on next week to talk about that and maybe what some of his expectations are moving forward for some of the other shows that he's not as familiar with. But the first topic that we're going to bring up tonight is Rotten Tomatoes. And I would actually, and we didn't discuss this beforehand, but I'd like to lump Metacritic into this as well. Sure. And Metacritic is another it's another aggregate site. It kind of focuses more on video games than on movies and TV shows. It still has those, and I think Rotten Tomatoes even still has games, but I think Tomatoes is known more for movies and TV, and Metacritic more so for the games, but the discussion surrounding each of them is similar. Rotten Tomatoes is a go-to for quote unquote how good a movie is, and has shown an impact on actual popularity and sales of major motion pictures. However, many still don't understand how Rotten Tomatoes works. The score we see first is the critical score. This can be a critic from the New York Times, or anyone from the New York Times to someone who has a blog that has it registered to be counted as a critic after passing the criteria, which we'll get to. There is also fan score based on fan account scoring. And tonight we're asking the question, is Rotten Tomatoes too important given what it actually reflects? Or is it truly the be all end all of the quality of a movie? Thoughts?
So for me, I think when Rotten Tomatoes first came out, it was, to me, this is how I'm checking everything. This was kind of the way Yelp was for food too. And then you start to realize that there are people that just go on, and we'll get into that when we actually talk about the bomb scoring and things like that, review bombing. And then you get people they will just review a movie or review a restaurant, whatever, even going to it. Or just for whatever reason, they just find something to hate about something and just give it a bad score. And that can be on the fan, but on the critic score, the thing that I think really, and I'm glad we did this the week after Uncharted, is a lot of the critical scores. These are people who have, don't even know what a video game is, that are getting scores to something based off a video game. And video games way more than I do. And I played Uncharted, but I don't have the vast knowledge of it that you do. And the way you mentioned how the characters match up with the actual personality of the characters in the video game is important. I think that's one of the most important things. If you're basing this wasn't supposed to be something that was Uncharted based off the characters. This was supposed to be a video game movie. This was real action, but based off the video game and how the characters act and everything like that. So the biggest issue I have is not Rotten Tomatoes itself. It's the way that people kind of reflect off Rotten Tomatoes. Big movies, Spider-Man, it puts up its score. It's 94% or whatever it was, and that's awesome and good for Spider-Man, but it's going to make money no matter what. I mean, that's just one of those things. It doesn't need the critical score, based on anything. But there are movies that are maybe mid-level marketing movies, or, maybe even a Marvel movie where you don't know characters, where they have these ratings come out and it can reflect poorly. Someone sees that Rotten Tomatoes score and they're like, well, I'm not like a Marvel person, so I'm not going to see this if Rotten Tomatoes is giving it a low score. And that's just based on an aggregate. That's also based off people that may not know anything about the characters in the movie, if it's based off of something. It also weighs too heavy on the fact that if you say one bad word about a movie, it's a negative score. And if you say one good word about a movie, it's a positive score. So it takes it very, there's not a good definitive line of good versus bad.
Do you not put a score in at the end?
You don't have to. It can just be there are reviews that don't give a score. There's certain newspapers, certain, media outlets that don't actually give a score. They just go, this movie, let's say, this is a general thing, but they could be like, this movie was fine, didn't live up to my expectations. Does that mean it's a bad movie? No, not necessarily, but Rotten Tomatoes would look at that as a negative review, the way that that scoring works. So that's another problem that I see, is that there's no clear cut definition of good versus bad to me. And that I feel like if you are a critic on Rotten Tomatoes, and even if your outlet doesn't necessarily use scoring, you should probably have to actually give it a definitive score one way or the other. That's my personal belief. So that we give scores. I mean, right. every time we do a review. So if your outlet doesn't necessarily do it as its outlet is the printed form, I still think you should have to submit something to Rotten Tomatoes,
right?
So that it is clear whether you think it's good or bad.
So let's talk about the criteria for who are the tomato meter approved critics. There's two sets of people, two different groups: individual professional film and TV critics who are tomato meter approved and whose reviews are included on the site regardless of where they are published. And number two, tomato meter approved publications such as websites, online video outlets, newspapers, consumer and trade magazines, alt weeklies, podcasts, radio programs, and TV shows. If a publication is approved, its review of a movie or show is included in the tomato meter regardless of which individual critic produced it. I'm going to hold on to that particular nugget. How do I become tomato meter approved? Sorry. Insight, audience, quality, dedication are the four things. Here's the eligibility guidelines. I'm just going to focus on, there's one that is pretty widely ubiquitous amongst all of the different kind of categories. So, and that is consistent review output for a minimum of 2 years. Okay. So video, a minimum of 30,000 subscribers on a video publishing platform qualifies for broad audience reach. Critics reaching underrepresented groups will also be considered on a case-by-case basis. And then, you have your written, you have your broadcast, you have your video. That's for an individual critic. For a publication video, you have to have a minimum of 200,000 subscribers on your platform. And the show should feature multiple critics. Podcasts, so this is for us. Consistent review output for a minimum of 2 years, published at least 4 episodes per month, at least 200 ratings on Apple Podcasts with a minimum score of 4 stars. Podcasts reaching underrepresented groups will also be considered on a case-by-case basis. Demonstrated social media presence and engagement with audience. Examples: Twitter, Facebook, and/or Instagram. Critics exclusively reviewing at a podcast should apply on behalf of the entire podcast as a publication, not individually. So, like, what's funny about this to me is, if you are a individual critic, you have to have like a self-published website. If you're a written publication, you have to have a minimum of 2 million visits over 6 months. You have to have 3 individually approved critics contributing to the publication on a regular basis. What did I say for the video? A subscriber base of 200,000 and multiple critics. And then for podcasts, it's just if you get 200 ratings that are decent.
I mean, that is shocking, the discrepancy. I mean, my guess is that they're maybe pickier than with podcasts, because everybody has a podcast, as we, joke about everyone, So maybe that's possibly it, is just that everybody has a podcast. So they're probably, that they may say that's the criteria, but they don't necessarily give it to you just because you meet these facts. Like they could easily be like, critics demonstrated social presence. Like, what does that mean? Like, all these, there's things that are kind of vague to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's some fine print, whatever. But that's funny to me because, like, if you look at those criteria, we'll have 2 years in September. Okay. 4 episodes a month. We do like 8 episodes a month, sometimes 10, now, but we were doing a weekly episode. So you're getting at minimum 4, prior to the change in format. Excuse me. Demonstrated social media presence and engagement with audience. We post from our Instagram account, especially, pretty much daily. Right.
Oh yeah.
And then the other one being critics exclusively reviewing at a podcast should apply on behalf of the entire podcast, whatever. So really the only one is the 200 Apple ratings that we're missing. And that's something that I feel like if we, rise and grind, nose to the grindstone, eat, pray, love, live, love, laugh, all that stuff, 5 a.m. club,
yeah,
that we could get that in time for the next time that we would be able to submit an application, which would be March of 23.
Yeah.
So that's what we're shooting for.
That's what we're shooting for. Make it happen, everyone. I mean, help us help you. We can help the Rotten Tomatoes scores.
I think, but I guess here's my take on it. And I think that I was having a conversation with Charles, our gaming correspondent. He messaged me this morning and to talk about a game that is releasing tomorrow, Elden Ring, which is a FromSoft game the lore was written by George Martin because he doesn't have anything better else to do. But it was currently tied for 6 on Metacritic for the best reviewed game of all time. And he asked the question, can it be that good? And we got into and I said, what's funny is we're actually doing a topic tonight about Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic. And what he said was, and this is how he uses both of these sites. He said, I use it to gauge to see, or as a gauge to see if a game, movie, show might deserve my time to look into. Not really an end all be all definitive list or rating or anything. Game ratings, if a game rating's high and it's a developer I like and I enjoy, or a genre and I enjoy, then it's something I consider. And he pointed out this as well, is that there's a lot of marketing dollars that go into making sure that some of those reviews are nice and high. And this is my thing, is like, I think that that's a decent use of the websites, both Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic. And I think that considering it the be all end all is not good, because as we're going to talk about, there's some really bad disparity, like gaps, you know what I mean, between critical and audience in a lot of cases. And it's a lot of the movies that we've reviewed. And I think that this is the whole, it's almost kind of like the argument that Scorsese makes about the Marvel movies, or that Ridley Scott makes about they're not cinema. And you have these people who are film critics, and they're saying, well, the lighting and the cinematography of Avengers Age of Ultron was substandard and some of the CGI looked weird. Well, guess what? It was fun. Who gives a shit? Let's talk about like the intent. Like, I think you have to grade on a scale of what the intent is. You know what I mean? Like,
you definitely have to.
And I don't think I don't think that that's the way that this is always done. You know what I mean? Like, nobody cares about the people in Godzilla versus Kong. So to grade on what the actors did was ridiculous. And that was part of your review. It's like, well, nobody cares about this, and there's too much of it, and that's why it's not good.
Right, exactly. If it was just them fighting, it's awesome. Like that, because that's the title of the movie. It wasn't called Millie Bobby Brown Crying.
Right.
So the intent is like that's I think for me that might be the hardest thing that critics don't really understand. You can be the best critic in the world, but I think sometimes like the you know that gets so lost in the sauce of what the intent of a movie is. And I'm not saying that okay, if you don't understand the maybe then every movie's good, because no, there are some movies that don't know how, they don't know what their intent is, or the editing's bad, so that doesn't get to the intent. So there's other factors that come into play. I'm just saying that I think a lot of times, like I said, I think Uncharted is a perfect example because it's based off a video game or something, and anytime it's based off of something, it's, to me, it's kind of, superhero movies, Marvel movies get pretty well regarded. So I'm not, getting too much into that, but there are things that are based off of books or whatever that the intent, maybe the movie isn't like, oh, it's not The Godfather with acting and stuff, but maybe the characters aren't supposed to be good actors. You know what I mean? They're not supposed to be good people, or not good people, but you know what I mean? Like maybe they're supposed to be kind of corny or whatever. And that's what's lost to me.
Yeah. I'm curious about, cause I have a list of movies with wide gaps that we're going to go over here, but I have a very specific movie that I'm interested in, and I'll bring it up here if it's relevant. Not really. What's another good? Nah, never mind. It wasn't relevant, so we'll just cast it aside. Review bombing is also a thing on these sites. I think it's probably more prevalent on Metacritic with games, because I'm here to tell you, because we see it too with the Marvel stuff and the DC stuff. The DC stuff this past year is very specific to where we've seen the review bombing, because Suicide Squad was review bombed in the sense that it came on the heels of the Snyder Cut, and the DC fans were adamant about release the Snyder Cut, and they took it out on James Gunn's Suicide Squad movie, which was excellent,
right,
and lowered the overall fan rating. I do think it's more prevalent on game sites, because the just the toxic fanboy culture that is so prevalent between like Xbox and PlayStation. But I think that does spill over a little bit into some of the nerd culture type movies and TV shows, because I think that as a group of people, there's like a lot of toxicity like wrapped up in being like a part of nerd culture, because typically those were the guys that got picked on in high school. You know what I mean? And so this is like their outlet is, well, fuck Brie Larson, man, because hot girls didn't like me in high school.
Right, exactly.
So, and that's why you have a pretty big gap on Captain Marvel, for example. I'm not saying everybody is like that, but I do think that the bulk of people in this sort of echo chamber of people that watch these movies that we watch, like Star Wars and Marvel and DC, and play video games, and watch the MCU shows, it's mostly white dudes, straight white dudes, and there's not a lot of there's not a lot of minority representation, whether it be females or African Americans or whatever. And the result is, when you get like a whole group of the same person, it can get toxic. And I do think that that's kind of what the review bomb culture is. I've never seen anything worse than The Last of Us Part 2, because that game was pretty much, I mean, it has the record critically for most awards won by a game, most game of the years. And on Metacritic, it's rated by fans at like a 4.9. And I think that's why I think that it's like, I think it is twofold, right? And I think that it's an interesting problem for each site. Metacritic the critics all know what they're talking about because they're all playing the game. And there's not really, if a game's fucking broken, Cyberpunk, we know that it's broken and we can critique that harshly, right? But then the fans get emotional about the hype train. And I think on the other side of it, on Rotten Tomatoes, where it's like the movies and the TV shows, critics want everything to be fucking Citizen Kane. And when it's just not that, because it's Mortal Kombat and it's two guys in suits fighting each other, it doesn't review well critically, but it's fan service and it's what the fans want, which is the exact opposite of the other thing. So I do think it's an interesting conundrum for each side of the fence, but I think that in general, I can't speak to this with Rotten Tomatoes, but I know on Metacritic with games, some developers tie their bonuses to those scores. So like you get a bonus of whatever if Metacritic comes in at an 80 overall. And there's been games that came in at the end of the time frame at like a 79. And so those people just didn't get their bonuses. So I don't know if that's something that they do with like Rotten Tomatoes and these aggregate sites as far as like back end deals with the contracts, because we know some people, like Leonardo DiCaprio very famously took a low base salary on Inception and backloaded it with incentives if the movie did well, and he ended up making a boatload more than he would have. I don't know if that's something that they do. I'd be interested to hear. If somebody knows, please let us know. If you're an actor or actress and you're aware that, movie studios tie incentives or bonuses or what have you to Rotten Tomato scores, please let us know. I'd love to have a conversation about that.
This means you, Tom Holland.
Yeah, fucker.
I won't say that. He's a kind gentleman.
Yeah, he's a coward. Coward. Some of the movies that I just wanted to bring up for large disparities between the critical score and the audience score. We already talked about Uncharted. The way I made this list was it was movies that we reviewed.
Yeah.
And then if they weren't necessarily ones that we specifically reviewed, they're at least in our sphere of this is what we talk about. So Uncharted critical 40, audience 90. This next one blew my mind.
Yeah, it is, Chrissy.
Ghostbusters Afterlife critical 63, which is still fresh. It's not certified fresh, but it's still fresh. Mm-hmm. And then the audience score 94.
That's mind-blowing.
Yeah. See, this is one that I thought that the critics got right and the audience got wrong. Cherry critical 37, audience 69. I mean, it's still low on the audience side, but not like totally damning. Mortal Kombat critical 54, audience 86. Again, we're not looking for Citizen Kane here, people, or Paddington 2 for that matter.
Right. Exactly. Paddington 2, actually.
Venom, the original Venom, critical 30, audience 81. I found this one to be pretty interesting, both that the critical was so low,
right,
and the audience was that high. Space Jam: A New Legacy, starring LeBron James, critical score 25, and an audience score of 79.
To me, I think that may be the craziest, because I think the middle is actually where that works.
Yeah,
for that movie, and it's just so insane that like critically, it's watchable. To me, when you're that low, that basically means you're not watchable.
25, yeah, means you're I would say that's unwatchable. But it was watchable, especially if you have kids.
Yeah, if you have kids, it's totally watchable.
Minus the facts that the rapists from Clockwork Orange had front row seats to that game. I'm just saying, a little weird, kind of a weird choice.
It was a weird choice.
Yeah. So many other characters in the Warner universe, and we went with the Droogs. The last Jedi, Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, critical 91, audience 42. I believe that the audience scored that correctly.
I mean, that's a pure example of getting it. You know what I mean? Too, like that's
the audience.
the audience just, you know.
Which is interesting because here we go. The same people who got it for The Last Jedi, Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, critical 52, audience 86. Wrong.
It's so weird. Like what?
Yeah.
I mean, I understand it. It's just weird. It's weird to me.
The final one, Captain Marvel, critical 79, audience 45. Because hot girls like Brie Larson didn't like me.
They can't be heroes.
They can't be heroes.
I think for me, that one might be the most damning because after, like, especially when we rewatched it, I mean, I didn't love it, but it's like definitely good. It's a good movie.
It's not a 45. I'd say it's probably not a 79, but it's certainly not a 45.
Yeah. There's probably a good case to be made that a lot of the actual scores in these movies are the middle. You know, I'm not saying every single time.
Yeah.
Some of them, but I would say the majority. Let's say the majority of them are probably in the middle.
Yeah. You wonder too how much of it is an overreaction to the other one, you know, in the sense of the audience. Like Venom is not an 81, but it's certainly not a 30.
No.
You know what I mean?
No.
It's probably what's that average out to, like a 60, 65 or 55, something like that.
55. Yeah.
55. It's probably a little bit higher than that. I'd probably give it a 6 personally. But closer to the middle. Sure. If it's a box and whisker chart, remember those?
I do remember those. I love a box and whisker chart. That's really funny.
That is a math term. Anyway, this is my final spiel on Rotten Tomatoes, is that I think that it's a good, like, quick look tool. If it's something that, kind of like Charles said in his comment, if it's something that, like, you know, the genre and the people who are making it and maybe some of the actors that are in it, and if the score is bad, then that maybe tells you something. You know what I mean? But I do think the best thing to do, and I've said this before when we've talked about this in passing, is find someone you trust who watches things. You know, we watched Uncharted. I know most of my friend group, your friend group, and a lot of people listening to this probably weren't going to go see Uncharted day one. Maybe they weren't so sure about it. But then after hearing our conversation, if they say, oh, I like movies that Greg likes, I like movies that Brent likes, maybe I would enjoy this film. I'll give it a shot.
Right.
Like, that's what you need to do.
This is the other thing that I will just say on, you know, supporting media in general. If you're at all interested, go see it.
Yeah.
You know, and like, that's the one thing too, like, who cares? I mean, like, I want you to listen to us. And if you like, well, Greg reviewed this movie or Brenton reviewed this movie or whatever, and they liked it and we've gotten along, like, I understand that. But like, if you're at all interested, I mean, for the most part, if you're interested in something and you go and see it, it's very rare it'll completely let you down. And then, you know, completely let you down. I mean, Star Wars, the latest Star Wars, that happens with things, but yeah, you know, you still want to see it. You don't want to be out of the zeitgeist for something with Star Wars. That would be my thing too, is then you're part of something too. You're also part of something, which is cool. So I think that's maybe my thing, is like, I don't know. I have a problem where, like, someone from, you know, this, you know, random newspaper in Omaha's score counts as much to me as someone that's been doing it for 45 years. And also I have a problem with someone doing a movie review for 45 years and has no idea what Captain Marvel's even about. You know what I mean? So there's like that, like, issue. It's a flawed system. I would imagine the people that created Rotten Tomatoes never expected it to be the be all end all.
Yeah.
And I don't know when that turned. I really don't. It's hard to say at the pinpoint of that, because, you know, you just go, you know, maybe you read like this, you watched Siskel and Ebert and you're like, oh, okay. Or you read one of their, you know, articles in the newspaper and it just gave you enough. But to me, that's maybe my biggest thing on this, is use Rotten Tomatoes as a resource, but don't make it your your thing to see a movie or not.
I think that it has to be, and even when it comes down to reviewing things, it's what you want. It's what you want.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I see this on Twitter a lot, like with movies and games and stuff, where it'll be like, just went and saw Uncharted, win or loss. It's like, well, that's up to you, man. Like that's
right.
You know, I just pre-ordered this game, winner W or L. It's like, well, I mean, you fucking spent the money. Why are you asking other people? You know what I mean? It's up to you to determine good or bad for you. You know what I mean? Because everybody's going to like things differently. I mean, there's movies. I'll give you a perfect example. There's movies that almost everybody likes, but then some people just doesn't click with them. I was online, I was scrolling, and one of the groups that I'm in on Facebook, it's a Star Wars group. And the one guy was like, well, everybody else is giving their ratings for each movie, so I'm going to give mine. And it was like the first three trilogy, the prequel trilogy was like 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10, 5 out of 10, whatever. Original trilogy, 8 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10. Sequels, you know, bad scores, whatever. And then it was Rogue One and Solo, and they gave Rogue One a 2 out of 10. I'm like, how can you like the original trilogy and dislike Rogue One so much? That doesn't make any sense to me. Sometimes shit just doesn't click with people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It definitely happens.
I also think too that it's like we said, it's understanding the spirit of the movie. No one is seeing Fast and Furious for high caliber thespianism. You know what I mean?
No.
So understand that.
They're seeing it for fast cars, women, and The Rock and family. The Rock calling people women and family.
Right. So let's see. From one set of master thespians.
That's right.
To another. And I think now is a good time to say, taste peace, motherfucker. Season 1 of DC's Peacemaker, a spinoff of Suicide Squad's Chris Smith, the Peacemaker played by John Cena, has recently concluded, and we have a review of the full season of James Gunn's side project. Danielle Brooks as Adebayo, Jennifer Holland as Harcourt, no relation to Tom, I believe. Freddie Stroma as Vigilante, Robert Patrick as Augie Smith, Nut Lee as Judo Master, Steve Agi or AG as Economos, and Chwokwudi Owuji as Mern join John Cena in his mission to complete Project Butterfly to save the world and fight his own demons and make peace regardless of how many men, women, and children he has to kill. Greg, you are famously can't look at John Cena's face for long periods of time.
Yeah.
So this required you to look at John Cena's face for a lengthy period of time.
It did.
Thoughts?
It did. It's great. Not his face, but this show. You get used to it. I also watched a lot of it on my phone, so maybe it helps.
Sure.
But no, this show, you had sent me a thing about how good you thought the show was. And I was like, okay, like for things like this, you and I are pretty much in agreement. And so I was excited, but I wasn't like, I was still like, I don't know. Like, I mean, is it going to be too much? That was my biggest concern. I thought maybe it would be too much because, Suicide Squad it flirted with too much, but it never did it. And it flirted. It's like, is this show, just because it's 8 episodes, will it do anything where I'm like, okay, no. It flirted that line just like Suicide Squad in the best possible way. It makes fun of itself constantly. It makes fun of superhero movies constantly in the best way. It still embraces the idea of superhero movies. I mean, the ending of this is very funny, the way it makes fun of things we're not spoiling that, but now. But I did think, everybody in this, it felt like a movie because I watched it so quickly, but in this show was perfect in their role. I mean, John Cena, as much as when he's in things and I've seen him, he is really good. I will say he knows his lane more than a lot of people do. It's very funny. He knows like he said, he is not a master thespian, but what he is really good at doing is being this like buff dude that can just make fun of himself and other people with absolutely like no issue. Like, he's so good at being the bully, but he's also good at like bullying himself in the same way too, which I think is just really a credit to him. I mean, that takes some skill. And the thing about this show too is I knew I was going to like it with that opening sequence, the dancing.
Yes.
And it's
straight face the whole time.
It's amazing. And when he holds up Judah Master, I mean, it makes you laugh. You know, I didn't watch it every single time because I did have to get through, but like the 3 or 4 times I did watch it because I just wanted to laugh, it gets you. And, you know, Eagly in it. I mean, Eagly's amazing. This whole thing is just this is the thing I'll say. It's stupid in the 10 out of 10 way. It really is. Yeah. It is the best thing. It's not mindless. It is very actually mindful, because the whole idea of the butterflies, not to get like I'm not going to get super philosophical, but the butterflies being inside people are, like you said, the inner demons inside of, you know, Peacemaker. And Chris. So it's this whole, you know, it's this metaphor. It's the actual superhero stuff that happens. It's backstabbing. It's finding little sneaky things that other people are going through. It's a little heartfelt, you know, but then also the thing I think makes it really good is at the end of the day, it's still Peacemaker as a bro. And so he just wants people to know when he has a diary. He gets super mad about that, which is one of my favorite things. I love how mad he gets about that. And then also just the way that I love the music in this. Yeah. It is just rock music all the time.
No wrong time to rock.
Wrong time to rock. It's just so, I will say, especially, you know, given a lot of other shows, a lot of things, it kind of hit at the perfect time. Everything's been so serious. And to have a show like this come along is pretty perfect timing. And you don't know if that's intentional or not, because Suicide Squad came out and you just have to follow these things. But everything's so serious right now. And this show's not going to get nominated for an Emmy, unfortunately, because I think it is actually that kind of quality.
Actually don't say that it won't, because The Boys was nominated, and this is in that very realm. Much like that. Yes.
Okay. I hope it does. I think something should happen with this show, because I mean, I know it's getting renewed, and that's a bigger thing than actually getting an Emmy, you know, for a lot of people, but it's pretty darn near perfect. I will 100% say that it is about as close to perfect as something like this can be without going overboard. It's like literally on that borderline. It comes so close to going overboard where you think it's going to happen and it doesn't. It's perfect. But that is my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think what was prescient about the story in and of itself was James Gunn answered a question. Why was the spinoff Peacemaker and not Bloodsport? Because Bloodsport, Idris Elba was more of the lead, and Peacemaker was even kind of a bad guy or an antagonist. In the Suicide Squad movie, Suicide Squad, there's no the on it. It's hard to keep those separate. And he said that he felt as though Bloodsport learned everything that he had to learn in the movie, and Peacemaker had more to learn about himself and about, you know, just life in general. And I think that they did a good job of conveying that through the story. Like the action, the ridiculous action and the jokes are what drive this the whole way through. But there's a story in this. And I think that it's very well told. And like you said, there's moments where it's heartfelt. There's moments of just absolute hilarious chaos. There's moments of, you know, people battling their own inner demons and such. It's not just Chris, it's, you know, some of the other characters as well. There's moments that are so over the top that you just can't help but like just stare in awe. And I think for me, and this is spoilers, so if you don't want to hear this, you know, skip ahead maybe 15 seconds or whatever. But for me, the sequence that really like drove home exactly what this show was when they got attacked by a fucking gorilla.
Yes, that was going to be the scene I pointed to.
And Economos killed it with a chainsaw.
And that's where he gained the respect.
What?
Yeah. you just killed a gorilla with a chainsaw, man. It was so funny.
Yeah, I think that I think John Cena deserves a lot of credit for knowing exactly what he is, but also maximizing those talents. His comedic timing is really good.
Yeah.
And he's able, I want to know, I'm curious to learn how much some of those scenes when they're at the base and he's just kind of firing back and forth with economists, how many of those are ad lib, especially one where he's naming all the people that they could have framed rather than his dad. And he's just naming people. There's no way that to an extent that wasn't ad libbed. You know what I mean? And it's funny the whole way through.
Oh yeah.
So the dad character is ridiculous. Auggie Smith, played by Robert Patrick. What did you think of some of the other characters? Autobio, Harcourt, Vigilante, Economos.
I mean, I think my favorite is probably Economos.
Yeah.
In the sense of like, he kind of, it's complete disrespect in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
They make the PowerPoint project scene is just hilarious.
Yes.
Or it's just like, oh my God, this is so bad. He's like, I didn't have that much. I was like, you had all the time. And
yeah.
like, but then he does gain the respect of like, he has the tattoo that looks like crap on his arm.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I sait them live. This band that was, Chris's favorite band. And so like this little bit of respect that he earns, but they still like, it's one of those things where like, and I think what I really like about this show is it is like your friends.
Mm-hmm.
Because you will have respect for anyone. And then the best way to show that respect is also to continue ripping on them.
Right.
And it's just like, because even after he gains respect, they're like making fun of his weight and like making fun of his just the way he looks. He's like, yeah. And he's like, why do you keep making fun of me? And it's just like, but they're still friends. And then at the end, when he has the picture of them laughing, it's just like, that's a great moment. Like that's an actual like great moment, where it's just like, that is actual friendship. You don't see that in a lot of other things. You don't really see that in like a Marvel movie. I mean, the closest thing you get is, Peter Parker and Tony Stark kind of thing, where
Guardians,
their son. Well, Guardians, yeah.
Which makes sense because
this
James Gunn.
And that's the thing I was actually going to bring up about this. This is what Guardians should be, but isn't. And it's just, it wants to be this so bad, where it wants to be this zany, but for whatever reason, it's just, and I think this is part of the problem. Is it's just this show, what happened with Guardians is it got too big. And I do, because it was, nobody had ever heard of it. And then it became it's a very popular movie with people. And so they kind of got lazy with it. I feel like you and I think the second one is not good at all.
Right.
Really in the scheme of Marvel, in the scheme of things, it's just not good. But this show, obviously it's playing off the card that nobody knows who Peacemaker is. I mean, like, it's just one of those things. And so there's no time to get lazy. And James Gunn was just like, I can do whatever I want with this.
Yeah.
And he does it in the best possible way. And we had a discussion,
But I want to bring that up, actually. Yeah. The point of, well, this is HBO Max and the Marvel shows it was said in our group text, network television. And that's why it's better. First of all, Disney Plus being compared to network television is a bit bunk. Like this isn't saying like, well, The Wire is better than Blue Bloods. I mean, come on, Disney Plus budget wise is going to throw their big swinging dick out whenever they need to for these Marvels and Star Wars shows. I think that it's less. You can do more mature things on HBO, obviously, but I think that this exposes the fact that the Marvel formula is getting a bit tired at this point. And I think that this is why this is successful and why The Boys is successful, because it completely turns that on its head. You know what I mean? Like The Boys, none of them are good people. No one's a hero. Even the heroes are villains. Same thing with this. You have a guy, Peacemaker, who kills everybody. You have Vigilante, who is a psychopath and is like humming La-di-do-da-day while he's sniping kids down. I think it just shows a craving for a more mature product, and it kind of exposes Marvel a little bit for being, as you've put it in the past many times, being a little bit too Disneyfied.
Yeah, and this is kind of, I mean, we can go on about how great the show is, but on my, I think not necessarily final point, but the point I want to hope, what I hope happens with this is I hope that DC looks at what Suicide Squad was and looks at what Peacemaker is and says, this is the direction we need to go. I hope that's the thing. And I understand the Batman is a different thing. Mm-hmm. And, I think I've gone on, I think that movie is going to be great, but the thing is Batman is Batman and will be successful. It has its way of being successful when it's Batman for the most part. But when you have a show like this, like I said, where nobody knows who Peacemaker is, mm-hmm. and, to go back on our Rotten Tomato discussion, where this was an audience score that was really high and a critical score that was really high. Sure. On a character that nobody knew anything about. And it's like, you have to play into this, DC. I understand you can't make everything silly, but you have to understand also, like, not everything has to be the darkest freaking moment in the world. And not everything is so serious all the time that, like, you get lost in it that you can't even make a joke. Like, there are movies, I mean, it happens, but they're like, even the Christopher Nolan Batman movies are very dark, but they crack jokes. They may be very subtle. They're very subtle, but like, there are actual moments in the latest, Batman DC movies where there was no way a joke was going to be made.
Yeah.
And it just couldn't happen, but they got to understand, they need to find that balance. Cause I think, I grew up with Batman and I grew up with Superman, and we both agree about, like, Superman being sort of boring, but there is something there. I mean, because the comic books still sell. There's something there that you can go with that instead of just making him, this godlike character with nothing else. And that's what I hope happens, is they use this and Suicide Squad to actually make their movies better.
Yeah, I think that both of those properties show that DC and Marvel should take note, but the DC, it shows you can make a mature content without it being the 4 hour long Snyder cut.
Right.
Where it's just so serious all the time. And it's hard to get past that in that movie. I love the Snyder cut, but my God, man, it shouldn't feel like watching Gettysburg,
Right. Yeah. I was going to say Amadeus, but yeah, the same thing. It's just like, it shouldn't feel like you're just trudging along.
Yeah.
Because this show, this is maybe the fastest I've watched a show in a long time.
Yeah, Sam. I ended up watching the last 4 episodes in one day.
I watched the last 4 episodes in a 24-hour span, not in one day, but in 24 hours. And it's like, this is I guess it is my final thought, is DC, you need to make this something to base other things off of. I understand not making everything silly and completely over the top, but you have to understand that can work in certain instances, and not to make everything. And the way this show ends is perfect with Aquaman, and that's just funny to me. Right. And work with that, please, DC.
I would give this series a 9 out of 10.
That's what I would give it to. 9 out of 10.
9 out of 10. Watch Peacemaker. Yes. Make it happen. Taste peace, motherfucker. We move on to The Amazing Race, the penultimate episode. What I was really hoping would culminate in a certain way, and then it did, and then it was taken away from me. That is a great picture of Phil Keegan.
Oop. There we go.
So the ninth leg of a great picture of Phil Keegan. The ninth leg of The Amazing Race. I don't have it right up, so I'm just shooting from the hip. Saw the teams have to drive to the second biggest city in Greece, get a clue, go to the first roadblock. The roadblock was called No Stone Left Unturned. Okay. And there was probably, how many stones do you think?
250, let's see, 2,000. Yeah.
About 2,000.
I would say about 2,000. Yeah.
And they're in a they're in like a half Coliseum thing, and there's like an oracle. And of those 2,000 stones, there are only 4 that have on the bottom of them a golden coin. Teams had to find the golden coin, and then they went to the next area where they were preached to by Socrates, or an actor playing Socrates, who was really creepy.
Yeah, that was weird.
And then they had a detour in which they could either smash plates or carry them. All 4 teams chose the smash plates, which I thought was very cathartic for them after the previous
Yes.
Race to a white tower for the final pit stop, at least in Europe. And Raquel and Caleb took the win, the flight attendants. Kim and Penn came in second. Very surprisingly, Aran and Natalie came in third, and Ryan and Dusty came in last. And I thought it was going to happen.
I did too.
It was snatched away from us. It was a non-elimination leg. So this leg of the race, your thoughts?
It was surprising to see. I was disappointed to see it wasn't an elimination one, especially when I found out it was the penultimate episode.
Yeah.
Like, we don't need all these in the last episode, as far as I'm concerned. And it wasn't because who was last. I actually didn't care about that. Like, that would have been funny to me, but I didn't care about that. It's just like the only issue, and I understand this was not a normal season. So
right.
There were too many episodes where nothing mattered. Winning mattered to some degree, but it's like, if you lost, yes, you started last, but there's enough to me in this show. What I love actually about this show, and which will bring me back, season after season, is that you can catch up. Just because you're in last doesn't mean you're just consistently gonna be in last. The roadblocks are good enough. There's enough strategery that can happen, that can happen, and that you can boost yourself up pretty quickly. I mean, we've seen it. We saw it in this season, and you can go from first to last and last to first, and you can actually do things. I will say, like, if there's a video, if I can get a weekly video, just Arun driving, I'd love that. Just a 15-minute clip.
Trying to get to work.
Like, yeah, it's just, give me like one of those maps where it shows like point A to point B, and it's just him having to get there. And it looks like it's just a straight line, but he just makes it look like a road track for F1. And it's just, that's the way I feel like it would be. Cause that guy you talked about the unintentional comedy in this show before it started.
He's it.
He's it. 10 out of 10 on that.
He is the Lenny Bruce of unintentional comedy.
It was unbelievable how bad, and how she kept trusting him to do it. So I don't know if it was confirmed or denied. I can't remember now. Does she just not have her driver's license? Does she have a visual impairment? Is she just constantly drunk? I'm not sure, but why she kept letting him drive, unless she was scared that she would drive, and since his sense of direction so bad that he would even be worse as
on the map.
I don't know, but it was hilarious. That was my favorite part of this show so far. And the stone turning thing was silly. I thought actually that of all the challenges, like, that one actually was the best and worst.
Yeah.
Because there's no strategy.
None.
And so that was funny.
Is, and she kind of alluded to this, is there is a strategy when you're there by yourself.
When you're there by yourself. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But as soon as you introduce other people. So here was I'm going to power rank my 4 favorite moments of hilarity. Right. Socrates. And I don't understand why his eyes were bugging out like that, or why he had a Scottish accent in Greece. That was weird.
And
how he was doing this. Knowledge.
That was so weird.
Yeah, very unnecessary. They really got into their roles. Number 2 was when they were driving to the rock challenge, and Natalia said, "All right, Dad, go straight," and he said, "Right or left?" And I almost choked to death. on whatever I was eating at the time.
It was so funny because you set me up. You said you didn't tell me when it would happen or anything, but you did tell me this. And I was watching it on my phone at work during my break, and I had to get up because someone like asked for me, like one of my coworkers asked for me, and he said it right as I was getting up, and I tripped over a desk because I was just like, I didn't fall down, but it was a good enough trip to like, and because it was so perfectly timed for me getting up and then him to just say right or left. And I'm like, this guy is a legend, just a legend. I just love it. So good.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Number 2, the Oracle. What the hell was she
What was
for 3.5 hours doing this?
That was so good.
Leave no stone unturned.
Oh my God.
There is no Dana, only Zool.
I have to imagine she was just on heroin. I'll just say that was probably her.
Oh my God. I couldn't like
it was amazing.
It was you want to talk about master thespianism. She held character for 3.5 hours while that young man tried like hell to look for that rock.
It was so funny.
Then my final one was when they were driving to the pit stop, and she said, "Park over here on the right." And he said, "You have to give me clearer directions." And then it went to like the confessional thing, and she's like, "He's always freaking out." And I said, "Park over there on the right." And he said I needed to give better directions, but like it was literally just on the right.
It was right there. It was so funny. Yeah, this show. I mean, I guess the good thing is we get another week.
2 hours. Yeah.
2 hours.
Episode.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't catch the 2 hour. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a lot to take in. I'm excited.
Right.
Hopefully it's just an hour of Arun driving.
I said at one point, because it looked
They're
like he was just straight up going the wrong way. And I was
Yeah.
like, Jesus, man, he's going to wind up in fucking Egypt.
Yeah. There was definitely like a concern where he would just go into like a bad part of the Middle East.
Like a war zone.
Yeah. There was definitely a concern for me where I'm like, we might not be getting Arun back here. I mean, they're real in it. Because this guy, this is if you get into an Uber and Arun is there,
get out.
Pay that little minimum, move yourself around because you do not want to have that. I'm not sure it'd be hilarious if he actually did like Uber on the side.
Right.
That'd be amazing.
It would be amazing.
It'd be a sightseeing tour, I guess.
Right. Moving on to that's just a
I'm gonna keep it up.
Great picture of Phil. The full disclosure on Celebrity Big Brother, I have not watched the finale, but I know who won, and I know who won America's favorite housemate. So I don't know the deets, like how it shook out.
I read the deets, but
okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't really feel the need to go into it too much. Misha Tate won, which makes sense because she won. She played a pretty flawless game.
She won pretty much from week one.
She won. I think she won HOH every time she was eligible to. Yeah. Or at least she only missed out on one. So that's pretty indicative of how dominant she was in the challenges. Carson Kressley won America's favorite house guest. I don't have the final tally because I need to add from this episode, but I know Ty definitely won the season.
Yeah.
Or is in first place heading out of this season of Celebrity Big Brother into the two next shows, which is going to be Top Chef and Survivor. Outside of that, I don't know where things lie because even though Lamar didn't win anything and he got eliminated, you picked up a bunch of points on him just for him constantly talking about the Kardashians and the basketball stuff.
Oh, sure.
So you really milked that whereas a lot of the other people didn't really talk about like why they were there so much, or like what they were famous for so much. So that really worked out in your favor. Janie picked up a lot of points late when Todrick actually started like making some moves.
Yeah.
Carson kind of won points throughout for doing well, and then obviously for winning America's House Guest. Kish lost Kirkpatrick after Kirkpatrick picked up some points for him and picked up Todd. And so then he actually wound up with a pretty decent amount of points. And then I just got blown out of the water. I'm like at -12 or something. So the next season's beginning. We're bringing in a expansion franchise. We're going to be joined by another competitor, Nicole McAfoose, Ty's wife. So for Survivor and Top Chef moving forward, what are your I guess Big Brother, Celebrity Big Brother, it was a weird season, but what were your takeaways from Big Brother?
I'm not going to judge regular Big Brother based off of this is my number one thing.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the people that probably go in regular Big Brother all kind of know how to play the game to at least some degree. There were just so many people on this show that didn't know how to play at all.
Right.
And we're kind of learning along the way. And then there are people actually did know how to play, but they kind of got messed up early on because so many people didn't know how to play. And that was weird. And so I'm not going to judge that. Like I'm not going to give this season, like, I hate to like take a passing on this, but I feel like it's unfair for me to grade it based off of the fact that A, it's the first time I've ever watched it. And B, I don't think this is actually what the show is normally.
Right.
Is that fair to say, Brent?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, Lamar didn't know the confessionals were recorded until like the last week.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. Also not super surprising.
Not shocking. No.
Yeah. So there's that. What do you expect to see out of Top Chef and Survivor? Now you have a little bit more experience with Top Chef. So
Top Chef, I haven't watched the last couple seasons. But I watched probably seasons 1 through 12 pretty religiously. And then I bounced around with different seasons. I mean, the thing about Top Chef is I at least am in the world of like I read a lot about dining. So if I hear a restaurant that like, ooh, I know that restaurant, or I know that chef that this person works with, I hope that gives me an edge. Right. When we actually get into it. That's my hope. But it's one of those things where, you can do that, you can say that, and then, they screw up something once and you're out. I mean, you're only as good as the last meal you make. And then Top Chef is really a good a good representation of that. I like that it's in Houston. Houston's a cool food city. So that's my biggest thing. I'm glad to just get back to it since I haven't been in Top Chef world for a while. That would be my biggest thing, is just like, I'm excited. I think of all the people that are involved, I think I may have like the most knowledge of that culture and that world.
Yeah, that's probably fair. That's probably fair.
I don't necessarily know if that gives me, that may be a disadvantage for me in a way too. So, but we'll see. I have high hopes for myself, but you never know.
Sure. Survivor.
That I know. I watched first part of the first season, maybe like half of it, and then kind of just fell away from it for no real reason. Like I don't even remember how many years ago was that. I'm excited to watch people not eat and get angry because they're hungry, get hangry. That seems like fun to me. I'm looking to the backstabbing, I think, is the thing I'm most looking forward to. That's, I listened to other things where they like this and describe it. I'm like, oh, I need to get back to it. For a reason, I just didn't. But I am looking forward to getting back to it.
Survivor is the most cutthroat of all these shows. Like, and it's really not even close, because like with the challenge, you have teams staying together for the entire season. Gone are the days on Survivor where you make an alliance of 6 and get everybody else out and then wheedle your way down. It's week to week. You don't know where you stand with anybody. And like you said, the food situation and the sleep situation and the fact that you're competing in these different challenges that are just designed to drain you mentally and physically. It's a fascinating experiment, like social experiment to watch. And then when you add in the fact that the winner gets $1 million, like it's very
big difference.
Yeah, I would say, like, I love the challenge, but I would say Survivor is my favorite of these shows.
Okay.
So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to bringing everybody else into it, with me.
Yeah.
So there's that. Media recommendations.
Don't have a lot this week. I watched The Secret Garden, based off the book from Macmillan. That's good. I didn't put this in here. That is good. I actually really enjoyed that. The movie is, I don't even know when the year the movie came out, but it's been around for a while. Janie used to watch it a lot when she was a kid. It's one of those like movies. It's for kids, but isn't for kids at all. Has very like adult themes. So that was good. I finished the book Flawless. I had mentioned that before. It's just a great heist book. It, like I had messaged you guys, if I was, 28 doing what I was doing, there's a good chance that I would have tried, going to Europe, figuring out a way to, rob a diamond area, and see what happens. These guys only went to prison for 5 years. They were able to conceal their diamond heist enough that they were able to walk out with money. So you never know. You never know what would happen. It's a young man. It's probably a younger man game for me at this point, but that was cool. And I'll just recommend Peacemaker again, just I thought it was so great. And it's basically what I've been watching.
Well, what do I know about diamonds? Don't they come from Antwerp?
That's right.
My only recommendation is the new PlayStation exclusive from Guerrilla Studios, Horizon Forbidden West. That's it. Peacemaker. And Peacemaker. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely Peacemaker. Jesus God, watch this show. Live, love it. And you need to live it. You need to love it. And you need to laugh it.
You do.
110%.
Never forget, the dream is free.
The hustle is sold separately.
The hustle is sold separately.
Absolutely. Housekeeping, or rather, BXG podcast is every Friday at 9 a.m. on Podbean Eastern Standard Time, 6 a.m. Pacific, 4 a.m. Hawaiian.
Aloha.
On podcast services around the globe. Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, other podcast services. Rate us at least 4 stars on Apple. At least
just give us 5.
Give us 5, but at least 4.
It's easier
on Apple, because we're making the push. We want to be Rotten Tomato certified tomato meter critics.
BXG RNG RT. That's what we want.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Social media, facebook.com/BXG podcast, Instagram @BXG podcast, @GT Feels, @Y2B, Twitter @BXG podcast, @GT Feels, and @Y2B. Over on our YouTube channel, BXG podcast. You can search that and subscribe to it while you're at it.
Yeah. Do all those things. Tell everyone.
Like, subscribe, share, subscribe again. Tell your mothers.
Tell your mothers.
Weekend
Thanks for
hug.
listening and watching Weekend Hug.
Bring it in. Take care, friends.
Bye.
That's an awesome
on that photo
picture.
I know.